Long before the gates of Jurassic Park ever opened, there was only an idea, an impossible dream lingering in the minds of scientists and storytellers. Dinosaurs had walked the Earth for millions of years before the rise of humankind, their bones hidden deep beneath rock and soil. To most people, they were nothing more than skeletons in dusty museums or terrifying monsters in picture books. But to one man, they were the key to something greater. John Hammond was his name, and he was a man of immense charm and imagination. To him, the past was not dead, it was waiting. He believed that through science and determination, the giants of yesterday could live again, not as fossils, but as living, breathing animals. The foundation of his dream was a bold theory of genetics. In the late 20th century, scientists began to unlock the secrets of DNA, the molecule that carried the code of life. Within every living thing, every plant, and every creature, there lay strands of information that told cells how to grow, how to live, and how to die. If such a code could be copied or rewritten, then perhaps life itself could be recreated. The idea seemed fanciful, but Hammond was a man who thrived on fanciful ideas. He found allies in brilliant geneticists, men and women who had been studying how to manipulate DNA for years. The real spark came not from the fossils themselves, but from the smallest of creatures that once feasted upon them. Mosquitoes and insects had been trapped in amber-hardened tree sap from millions of years ago. Within their bodies, scientists discovered fragments of blood taken from dinosaurs long vanished. In that blood were tiny bits of genetic code, pieces of the puzzle that could bring back entire species. It was like finding scraps of a long-lost book and using them to rewrite the tale. Of course, the code was never complete. DNA decays over time, and the strands were broken, missing many parts. To bridge the gaps, Hammond's team turned to modern creatures. Frogs, lizards, and birds all shared pieces of ancestry with dinosaurs. By stitching fragments together, they created something that was not quite ancient and not quite modern, but alive nonetheless. What they built in their laboratories was not an illusion, it was life, breathing life, where once there had been only silence. When the first small dinosaur hatched from its egg, Hammond looked upon it with awe. It was fragile, and yet it carried the weight of millions of years. To him, this was not only science, it was magic. And like all magicians, he wanted to share the trick with the world. But his vision was not one of cages and laboratories. He dreamed of a park, a grand sanctuary, where people from every corner of the globe could walk among the living giants of the past. He imagined families riding in vehicles through lush valleys as brachiosaurs lifted their heads to the sky. He saw children watching raptors dart through the underbrush. He believed it would be a place of wonder where education and entertainment would merge into something new. Behind the charm, however, there were shadows. The project required immense secrecy and wealth. Hammond created a company called InGen to shield the work from prying eyes. They built laboratories on a remote island off the coast of Costa Rica, an island called Isla Nublar. There the scientists worked in hidden facilities, perfecting their creations and preparing for the day when the gates would open. But not all shared Hammond's vision. Some saw the creatures as weapons or as sources of profit beyond measure. The dinosaurs themselves were not aware of these dreams or schemes. They were simply alive again, as they had once been long ago when the world was theirs. In the calm of that island, the first generation of cloned dinosaurs walked under artificial skies. They lived in enclosures designed to mimic jungles and plains. Each one carried in its blood both the weight of the ancient past and the meddling hand of humankind. The question was never if they could be created, but whether they should. And though the men and women of InGen pressed forward with determination, few truly stopped to consider the danger of resurrecting such power. As the years moved closer to the opening of the park, Hammond prepared for his grand unveiling. Investors were eager, governments were curious, and scientists were both excited and fearful. The dinosaurs were no longer bones in a museum. They were alive, breathing, roaring, eating, and hunting. In the quiet of the island at night, their calls echoed across the jungle, a haunting reminder that the past was not gone but reborn. And so the stage was set. Jurassic Park was no longer a dream, it was becoming reality. But the reality of living with creatures that once ruled the earth would prove far more complex and perilous than anyone imagined. For nature is not easily controlled, and the past does not always rest peacefully when disturbed. Far out in the Pacific Ocean beyond the mainland of Costa Rica lies an island wrapped in mist and mystery. Isla Nublar was its name, a place once untouched by the modern world. It was small compared to the continents of the earth, but large enough to hold forests that whispered with the sound of waves and valleys hidden in green shadows. To To the unknowing eye, it was nothing more than another volcanic island rising from the sea with steep cliffs and lush canopies. But within its borders, Hammond's dream began to take shape. The island itself had been chosen with care. Hammond wanted a location remote enough to keep secrets safe, but close enough to be reached by ship or helicopter. Isla Nublar was far from busy shipping lanes and covered in dense jungle that shielded prying eyes. It had natural lagoons, rivers, and mountains, making it the perfect stage for what Hammond called his most ambitious creation. When he first stepped onto its shore, he imagined it as a paradise where the giants of yesterday would once again roam free. InGen poured its wealth into reshaping the island. Roads were carved through the jungle, heavy fences were raised across valleys, and laboratories were built in hidden clearings. At the heart of it all was the control center, a hub where scientists and engineers could watch over every creature, every enclosure, and every guest. From high towers, they could see the forest canopies ripple as ancient beasts moved beneath the trees. They believed they could control every heartbeat on the island with buttons and screens. The park was designed not only as a sanctuary for dinosaurs, but as an attraction for people. There would be guided tours, electric vehicles following tracks through open plains where herbivores grazed. Families would watch from behind glass as raptors stalked one another in carefully arranged habitats. The brachiosaurs would rise like towers, eating from treetops while children gasped in wonder. Even the terrifying tyrannosaur would have its stage, a massive paddock built to hold it back, while visitors stared in awe. Hammond imagined laughter and applause filling the air just as strongly as the calls of the animals themselves. Yet even in paradise, nature lingered in its own way. The island was still volcanic, its mountains breathing faint heat from the earth below. Storms rolled in from the ocean, bringing heavy rains and howling winds. The jungle itself was alive with birds, insects, and reptiles that cared nothing for fences or cameras. The dinosaurs were not alone in their new home. They shared it with creatures that had been there long before and would remain long after. The balance of life was more complex than any human could arrange. Still, Hammond's vision pressed on. Scientists worked in labs that were hidden beneath the surface, where eggs were nurtured and hatched. In warm chambers, tiny claws broke through shells as creatures opened their eyes to a world that had not seen their kind for more than 60 million years. They were raised by human caretakers who fed them, guided them, and studied their growth. In those early days, many of the animals saw humans as protectors, not as prey. But instinct runs deep, and instincts older than humankind stirred within their blood. The fences were meant to keep balance. High walls of steel lined with electric currents stood between the dinosaurs and their freedom. Hammond believed the barriers were enough. He trusted the technology, the computers, and the men who watched the monitors. But even the strongest walls were only human work, and the animals inside were forces of nature. For though they were born in laboratories, they carried within them the raw, untamed power of the Earth's past. The first guests who visited in secret marveled at what they saw. They rode through the fields and watched as herds of triceratops moved like armored tanks across the grass. They leaned close to the glass and saw the gleam of raptor eyes watching them with quiet calculation. They felt the ground tremble when the tyrannosaur roared in its paddock, shaking the leaves of nearby trees. It was a place of awe where the ancient world and the modern one touched. But beneath the wonder there was a quiet unease. For the island was not only a stage for beauty, it was also a cage for predators. The creatures were not tame, they were not pets. They were alive, and alive in the truest sense of the word. They hunted, they challenged one another, and they tested the limits of their enclosures. The caretakers soon learned that raptors were clever, far more clever than anyone had guessed. They worked together, testing fences, probing for weaknesses. The tyrannosaur showed strength that bent steel and broke trees. Even the gentle herbivores sometimes lashed out with power that shattered vehicles. The park was no zoo, it was a world that could not easily be held. Still, Hammond believed in his dream. He told his workers and investors that the park would be safe, that the systems would hold, and that the dinosaurs would bring joy, not fear. He imagined opening day with children's laughter and the sound of camera shutters clicking in wonder. The gates of Isla Nublar would open to the world, and history would be reborn. Yet the island itself seemed to whisper warnings. Storms grew stronger. Equipment failed. Workers vanished in the jungle. The animals grew restless, as if they felt the pull of something beyond the fences. And so the stage was set for what was to come. Isla Nublar was not just an island. It was a crucible where the past and present clashed, where dreams of control would meet the reality of nature unleashed. When the park was almost ready to open, the most exciting part of it was not the fences, or the cars, or even the big gates. The most exciting part was the dinosaurs. They were the stars of the island. Each kind of dinosaur had its own home and its own story. Some were gentle giants who ate leaves. Some were fast hunters with sharp claws. And one was the king of them all, with teeth as long as your hand. The first kind many people saw were the brachiosaurs. They were huge creatures taller than houses. Their necks stretched high into the trees, and they could nibble leaves from the very top branches where no other animal could reach. When they walked, the ground shook a little like a faraway drum. But even though they were so big, they were peaceful. They moved slowly and did not care much about people. They cared only about eating leaves and enjoying the sunshine. Seeing them was like watching mountains come to life. Then there were the triceratops. These dinosaurs had 3 sharp horns on their faces and a big frill like a shield behind their heads. They walked on 4 legs and looked a little like giant rhinos. They were also plant eaters, but they could be very strong when they were upset. A triceratops could charge with its horns and knock over a car if it wanted to. In the park, they were usually calm, but sometimes they got sick from eating strange plants, and the workers had to take care of them. There were also smaller but speedy dinosaurs. The gallimimus were quick and graceful, running in herds across the open fields. They looked a little like giant ostriches with long legs and long necks. When they ran together, they moved like a river of feathers and scales flowing across the land. They were not dangerous to people, but they could knock someone over just by rushing past. But not all the dinosaurs were gentle. Some were hunters. The velociraptors were among the most dangerous. They were not the largest dinosaurs, but they were very smart. They worked together like a pack of wolves, and they could open doors or test fences. They had sharp claws on their feet shaped like sickles, and they could leap high and strike quickly. The workers on the island were always careful around them because they knew the raptors were always watching, always thinking. And then there was the Tyrannosaurus Rex, the king. It was the largest meat eater on the island, with a head so big it could bite through bone. Its roar rolled across the trees like thunder, and every creature on the island knew to listen. Even though the fences were tall and strong, everyone who worked at the park respected the tyrannosaur. It could not be tamed. It could not be controlled. It was nature's ruler from a time long before humans. When people saw it for the first time, their hearts raced with both fear and wonder. Other dinosaurs lived on the island too. The dilophosaurs were smaller hunters with strange frills around their necks. In the park, they were known to spit venom that could blind their prey, though in the real ancient world, they may not have done this. Still, they added mystery and surprise to the park. There were also compys, tiny dinosaurs that scurried in groups, sometimes curious, sometimes mischievous. And hidden in the waters were ancient reptiles who swam silently under the surface waiting for food. Each dinosaur played a part in Hammond's dream. The big plant eaters were meant to bring awe and beauty. The smaller ones showed speed and agility. The hunters gave the park excitement and a little fear. Together they created a living picture of a world that had ended millions of years ago. Hammond wanted people to feel as if they had stepped into the past, a past where dinosaurs still walked the earth. But while the dinosaurs looked like animals from books and movies, they were more than that. They were alive. They had feelings, instincts, and needs. They were not simply displays to be looked at. They were creatures with the same wild hearts they had always carried. Some grew restless in their cages. Some tested the fences again and again, as if they wanted to be free. Others simply lived their days eating, sleeping, and moving through the forests without concern for the people who watched them. For the workers and scientists, every day on the island was filled with wonder, but also with worry. The dinosaurs were amazing, but they were also unpredictable. Could they really be kept in fences forever? Could people truly control creatures so powerful, so ancient, so full of life? The dinosaurs did not think about these questions. They only lived as they had always lived, wild and untamed. And so the park stood with its animals ready to amaze the world. But beneath the wonder there was always a whisper, a quiet reminder that the dinosaurs were not toys or pets. They were real. They were strong. And they were part of a world that had ended long ago, a world that did not always fit with the one humans had built. The island was ready, the dinosaurs were alive, and the fences were built. Now all that was left was to share the park with the world. John Hammond believed that people would love it just as much as he did. He wanted children to laugh and families to gasp in wonder when they saw real dinosaurs for the first time. But before the park could open to everyone, Hammond needed to show it to a small group of visitors. They would test the park and decide if it was safe enough to welcome the rest of the world. The building of the park had taken many years. Ships carried steel and supplies across the ocean. Helicopters brought workers to the island. Day by day, the jungle was cut and shaped into roads, paddocks, and viewing areas. Towers rose with bright lights, and miles of wires were strung to power fences and computers. The control room was filled with blinking screens and buttons where scientists could watch the dinosaurs and track their movements. Hammond spared no expense. Everything he could think of was added to keep the island safe. But even with so much work, things did not always go smoothly. Storms swept across the island, tearing at fences and knocking down trees. Equipment sometimes broke in the wet jungle air. Workers whispered to each other about accidents in the field when dinosaurs tested the fences or surprised a team in the forest. Hammond brushed aside their worries. He told them that science and technology could solve every problem. He wanted to believe that the park would run perfectly once the doors opened. When the time came to invite the first guests, Hammond chose them carefully. He wanted scientists who could give the park their approval, and he wanted lawyers who could tell investors that everything was safe. He also wanted children, because he believed that no one could feel the magic of the park better than the young. So 2 of his grandchildren, Tim and Lex, were flown to the island to be among the very first to see the dinosaurs. The visitors arrived by helicopter. As they flew over the ocean and toward the island, they could see the green mountains rising from the mist. The forests looked wild and untouched, and the waves crashed against black cliffs. When the helicopter landed, Hammond greeted them with his warm smile and twinkling eyes. He was proud to show them what he had built. The tour began in special cars that moved on tracks. The cars were electric and carried the visitors through different areas of the park. The first time the guests saw a brachiosaur stretching its neck to the sky, their eyes grew wide with wonder. The ground shook as the great dinosaur stepped closer, and everyone realized they were truly standing among living giants. The visitors were amazed but also uneasy. Some of the scientists whispered that cloning such creatures might not be wise. They worried about balance, about control, about what might happen if something went wrong. The tour showed them Triceratops, Gallimimus, and even the raptor pens. But not all the dinosaurs came when expected. Sometimes the fields were empty, and the cars rolled past without a single glimpse. Dinosaurs are not like machines. They do not appear on command. They move when they wish, and they hide when they choose. This was another sign that Hammond's dream, no matter how grand, was built on the will of wild animals, not on switches and screens. Still, the children were delighted. Tim carried books filled with dinosaur facts, and Lex asked questions about every creature. They leaned close to the glass and pointed excitedly whenever they saw something moving in the trees. For them, the park was not just science or business. It was magic. Hammond smiled as he watched them. Their laughter was what he had always imagined when he dreamed of Jurassic Park. But even as the visitors toured, problems stirred quietly in the background. A man working for the park planned to steal pieces of dinosaur DNA to sell to another company. To carry out his plan, he needed to shut down parts of the park's security. He thought it would only be for a short time, long enough to slip away. But shutting down security on an island filled with dinosaurs was no small thing. As the visitors' cars rolled deeper into the park and a storm began to gather overhead, no one knew that the island's careful balance was about to break. The fences that held the animals were strong, but they were powered by computers and wires could go dark. For the moment, though, the guests still believed they were safe. They laughed in the cars, pointed at the dinosaurs, and felt the thrill of being in a place where the past lived again. The storm clouds built slowly above them, the wind rustled through the jungle, and somewhere in the distance a deep roar rolled across the trees. The park was ready to reveal not only its wonders, but also its dangers. The visitors were still on their tour when the sky began to change. At first it was only a few gray clouds drifting across the sun, but soon the wind grew stronger. The trees bent and swayed, and the air grew heavy with the smell of rain. Far away, thunder rumbled like the growl of some giant animal. A tropical storm was coming, and on Isla Nublar, storms could grow wild and dangerous very quickly. The tour cars rolled along their tracks as raindrops began to fall against the glass. Lightning flashed across the sky, bright and sharp, followed by booms that made the ground tremble. The children huddled close together, half excited and half scared. The grown-ups kept their eyes on the fences, making sure everything still looked safe. But in the control room of the park, not everything was safe. One of the workers, a man named Dennis, had a secret plan. He wanted to take the dinosaur DNA and sell it to another company. To do this, he shut down many of the park's systems. He thought he could turn them off, grab what he needed, and turn them back on before anyone noticed. He believed the storm would hide his actions, making it easier to escape. But when he turned off the systems, he also turned off something far more important: the electric fences that kept the dinosaurs inside their paddocks. At first, no one realized what had happened. The cars stopped moving, stuck on the tracks. The radios went quiet. Screens in the control room went dark. The workers tried to bring things back online, but the computers would not listen. One by one, the safety systems that held the island together were gone. And in the rain, the dinosaurs began to notice. The Tyrannosaurus Rex was the first. She had been waiting behind her fence, restless and hungry. She had tested the wires before, felt the sharp sting of electricity, and stepped back. But now, in the flashing stormlight, she reached forward again. The fence was silent. No spark. No pain. With one push of her mighty head, the metal bent and snapped. The king of the island was free. The visitors sat in their cars, unable to move, when the ground began to shake. A shadow moved through the rain, and then the Tyrannosaur stepped out. She was enormous, her skin wet and shining in the storm. Her eyes glowed in the lightning as she let out a roar so loud it seemed to split the sky. The children covered their ears. The grown-ups froze. This was no longer a tour. This was survival. The Tyrannosaur sniffed at the cars, curious. She pressed her snout against the glass, fogging it with her hot breath. When the cars did not move, she struck with her teeth and claws. Metal bent. Glass shattered. The visitors screamed as the beast tore into the vehicles. In the chaos, some managed to escape into the storm, running blindly through the jungle while the Tyrannosaur chased after them with heavy steps that shook the earth. Elsewhere on the island, the raptors also noticed the power was gone. Their fences no longer buzzed with electricity. Clever and patient, they found weak spots and began to push and claw. Soon, they too were free, slipping into the trees like shadows. They hunted silently, moving together, eyes glowing with intelligence. The smaller dinosaurs scattered. Gallimimus herds raced through the open fields in panic, their feet drumming like rain on the earth. Triceratops roared and crashed through fences as the storm frightened them. The once orderly park became a wild jungle again, filled with creatures that no human could control. The workers tried to fix the systems, but the storm knocked out more power lines, and the computers refused to obey. The island that had been carefully built to hold the past under control was now something else entirely. It was the ancient world returned, a place where dinosaurs ruled once more and humans were only visitors, lost and afraid. The children and the grown-ups who had come to see the park found themselves running through dark forests, trying to find safety. Every shadow seemed alive. Every sound was a reminder that something might be watching. And above it all, the storm raged, lightning flashing across the sky while the roar of the Tyrannosaur rolled through the night. But even in such fear, there was still a kind of wonder. The dinosaurs were free, living as they once had long ago. The fences and machines could not hold them forever. They belonged to the world, not to the park. Hammond's dream had brought them back, but now nature itself had taken over, reminding everyone that life could never be fully controlled. The storm howled on, and the night became a test of survival. The park was no longer a wonderland. It had become a place where humans were no longer in charge. The dinosaurs were free, and the island belonged to them once more. The storm raged through the night as the visitors tried to stay safe. Rain poured down in sheets, soaking the ground until it turned to mud. Trees bent and swayed under the heavy winds, and lightning lit up the jungle in sudden flashes of white light. All around, the sounds of dinosaurs echoed through the darkness. The island that had once felt like a park now felt like another world, one where people were very small and very fragile. The children stayed close together. Tim and Lex held onto each other's hands, reminding themselves that as long as they were together, they would not give up hope. They remembered their grandfather's stories about the park being a place of wonder, and they tried to believe that even in the middle of danger, there was still something magical about being among living dinosaurs. Some of the grown-ups tried to guide them through the jungle. They spoke softly, telling the children not to make loud noises, not to shine lights too brightly, and always to watch the shadows. Every step was careful. Sometimes they stopped to listen, and sometimes they crouched low when they heard the rustle of leaves nearby. In the storm, every sound seemed louder, and every movement seemed closer than it really was. The Tyrannosaurus roamed the forests, roaring now and then to announce its presence. Each roar rolled like thunder across the trees, reminding everyone that the king of the island was awake and hunting. But the visitors learned that if they stayed still, if they stayed quiet, the great dinosaur sometimes passed them by. Its eyes were sharp, but its hunting depended more on movement and sound. To the children, standing still and silent felt like holding their breath forever. Yet they were brave, and they listened carefully to the grown-ups' whispers. At one point, the visitors found a herd of gallimimus running across an open field. The dinosaurs were frightened by the storm, and they dashed in one huge wave, their feet drumming the earth. The children watched in amazement as the herd moved like a living river. But then the tyrannosaur appeared from the trees and attacked the gallimimus, snatching one in its mighty jaws. The visitors crouched low in the grass, staying quiet while the scene played out. Even though it was frightening, it was also like watching nature itself, powerful, wild, and real. The raptors were another danger. Unlike the tyrannosaur, they did not roar to announce themselves. They moved in silence, clever and quick. The visitors tried to avoid the parts of the jungle where the raptors had broken free, but sometimes they heard their cries in the distance. High, sharp calls that sounded like laughter. The grown-ups explained that raptors worked together like a team, always hunting in groups. This made them very dangerous, but it also meant that if the visitors stayed away from the raptors' hunting grounds, they could still be safe. Through all of this, the children found moments of wonder. They saw a brachiosaur in the stormlight, calmly chewing leaves while rain slid down its long neck. They saw a triceratops resting under a tree, protecting its young. Even though the island was filled with danger, it was also filled with beauty. The dinosaurs were not villains. They were simply alive, doing what they had always done millions of years ago. In the control room, the workers and scientists were trying to bring the systems back online. They clicked at keyboards and argued over screens, trying to restore power to the fences and the cars. They knew that the longer the systems stayed down, the harder it would be to protect the visitors. Everyone worked with tense faces, listening to the storm batter the buildings outside. Back in the jungle, the visitors pressed on. They looked for safe shelters, places where the dinosaurs could not reach them. They climbed into trees to rest for short moments, and they shared food when they had it. The children were tired, but they stayed strong, telling each other stories to keep their spirits high. Sometimes Tim would whisper dinosaur facts from his books, and Lex would imagine they were on an adventure, like explorers from a long-ago tale. The night was long, but slowly the storm began to weaken. The rain softened, the winds grew quieter, and the clouds started to drift apart. Sunlight peeked through in patches, turning the wet jungle leaves into glittering jewels. The worst of the storm had passed, but the dinosaurs were still free, and the island was still wild. The visitors knew their struggle was not over. But they also knew that if they stayed together, listened to one another, and kept their courage, they might yet find their way home. The park had shown them its wonders and its dangers. Now the island itself would test their strength and their hearts. The storm had passed, but the danger was not gone. The visitors had survived the long night, yet the island was still filled with dinosaurs that no longer stayed behind their fences. The tyrannosaur wandered freely through the valleys, and the smaller dinosaurs grazed in the open fields. But the ones that caused the most worry were the raptors. The velociraptors were small compared to the tyrannosaur, but they were fast, clever, and always working together. They were like shadows slipping between the trees, their eyes shining with sharp curiosity. They had watched the fences fall silent, and now they tested every corner of the island, learning where they could go and what they could do. While the tyrannosaur ruled with strength, the raptors ruled with cunning. The visitors had made their way to the main buildings of the park, hoping for shelter. The children were tired but still brave, holding onto the grown-ups' hands as they walked up the long steps. The building looked safe, with solid walls and doors that closed tight. Inside, there were computers, lights, and even a kitchen with food. For the first time in many hours, the children felt almost comfortable again. But the raptors had followed. They were hunters, and they knew how to track. As the visitors tried to rest, the raptors prowled around the outside of the building, searching for ways in. They tested doors. They scratched at windows. They made soft clicking sounds to one another as they worked together. The visitors listened in silence, their hearts thumping like drums. The children soon found themselves hiding in the kitchen. It was a large room with shiny counters and tall cupboards. They thought they might be safe there. But then they heard the door creak open, and the raptors slipped inside. Their claws clicked against the floor as they sniffed the air, hunting. The children crouched low, holding their breath. The raptors split apart, moving on silent feet. One checked the counters, another padded slowly toward the cupboards. Their long claws tapped against the metal as they searched. The children moved carefully, crawling between tables and hiding behind shelves. Every movement had to be slow and quiet. If they rushed, the raptors would see them. If they whispered, the raptors would hear. It was a game of patience, of waiting, of being as still as the shadows. At one moment, a raptor jumped onto a counter, its claws scraping against the steel. Its head tilted, and its golden eyes scanned the room. For a breathless moment, it seemed to look straight at the children. But then a spoon clattered from a counter on the other side of the room, and the raptor turned its attention there. The children slipped away, inch by inch, until they were out of the kitchen and back with the grown-ups. Meanwhile, the scientists in the control room were finally restoring power. One by one, the lights flickered back on. The fences hummed again. The doors locked. The park's systems began to work once more. But for the visitors, the raptors were already inside, and fences could no longer protect them. The chase through the building reached its peak when the raptors cornered the visitors near the skeleton displays. Huge bones of dinosaurs hung above them, reminders of a time when these creatures ruled the earth. The raptors closed in, their claws clicking against the floor, their teeth flashing. The children huddled close to the grown-ups, waiting for the end. And then, just as the raptors leapt, the tyrannosaur appeared. She had followed the raptors into the building, smashing walls and knocking over displays with her mighty tail. Her roar shook the room as she lunged at the raptors. In an instant, the hunters became the hunted. The raptors screeched and snapped, but they were no match for the tyrannosaur's massive jaws. The skeletons crashed down, bones shattering, as the great battle raged. The visitors seized the chance to escape. They hurried down the steps, through the doors, and out into the sunlight. A helicopter was waiting, blades spinning, ready to carry them away from the island. Hammond was there, his face heavy with sadness, but also with relief. His dream had been beautiful, but it had also been dangerous, and now he understood that some dreams were not meant to be controlled. The children climbed aboard the helicopter, holding hands as they looked out one last time. Below them, the island stretched green and wild. Dinosaurs moved through the forests and fields, free once more. The tyrannosaur stood tall and proud, roaring her victory to the sky. The helicopter lifted higher, carrying the visitors away from danger. The storm had passed. The island was behind them, and though they were leaving, the memory of walking among dinosaurs would stay with them forever. As the helicopter carried the visitors away from the island, the sound of the storm faded behind them. The children leaned against the windows, watching the green land grow smaller and smaller until it was only a shadow on the ocean. The grown-ups sat quietly, each lost in thought. No one spoke for a while because there was so much to think about. They had seen dinosaurs alive and real. They had walked in a world that no one thought could ever return. And they had learned just how powerful and unpredictable that world could be. John Hammond looked down at the island with heavy eyes. He had dreamed of Jurassic Park for so long. He had wanted to create a place of wonder and joy where families could see the giants of the past. He had built fences and computers and believed that science could control nature. But now he understood something different. Nature is not a puzzle to be solved or a machine to be switched on. Nature has its own ways and its own balance. Dinosaurs were not meant to live behind fences. They were not toys or attractions. They were living beings carrying the strength of millions of years. For the children, the lesson was simpler, but just as deep. Tim and Lex had been afraid, but they had also seen beauty. They had seen brachiosaurs stretching to the treetops like gentle towers. They had seen triceratops resting peacefully in the grass. They had seen herds of gallimimus flowing like rivers across the plains. And even though the tyrannosaur and the raptors had been frightening, they were also proof of nature's power. The children realized that dinosaurs were not monsters. They were part of life itself. The scientists thought carefully too. Some of them had warned that bringing back extinct creatures might not be wise. Others had been amazed by the success of cloning. Now they knew that science could achieve incredible things, but also that every choice carried responsibility. Just because something can be done does not mean it should be done. Wisdom is as important as knowledge. As the helicopter flew through the morning light, birds soared alongside it. They flapped their wings gracefully and called out in the fresh air. The children watched them and remembered that birds are the closest relatives of dinosaurs. In a way, the age of dinosaurs had never truly ended. It lived on in every feather, every wing, and every song of the birds above. That thought brought comfort. Perhaps nature itself had chosen how dinosaurs would survive. Not through cages or fences, but through evolution and change. Hammond closed his eyes and listened to the helicopter blades turning. He knew the park would never open. His dream had been too dangerous. But he also knew that for a short time, he had touched the impossible. He had seen creatures of long ago breathe again. That was something he would never forget. And though his heart was heavy, he hoped the world had learned the same lesson he had. Respect for life, respect for nature, and respect for the balance that keeps the world alive. For the children, the memory would stay bright like a story told at night. They would remember the fear, but also the wonder. They would remember the storm, but also the sunlight that followed. They would remember that sometimes dreams can come true, but not always in the way we imagine. And when they closed their eyes at night, they would still see the brachiosaurs walking calmly through the trees, as if nothing in the world could ever disturb them. Jurassic Park was never just about dinosaurs. It was about the courage to dream and the wisdom to know when to stop. It was about the beauty of life and the danger of forgetting how powerful it can be. And it was about remembering that even the smallest creature from the past can change the future. The helicopter carried them home across the endless blue sea. The island grew smaller until it disappeared. The dinosaurs remained behind, free once more in their wild world. And the visitors carried with them a story they would never forget, a story of wonder and caution, of fear and amazement. A story of Jurassic Park. Night falls over the ocean, and the island rests beneath the stars. The waves whisper against the black cliffs, carrying secrets of long ages past. In the forests, the dinosaurs breathe softly as they sleep, their chests rising and falling with the rhythm of the earth itself. The brachiosaurs fold their necks and doze like giant statues. The triceratops curl close to their young beneath the trees. Even the tyrannosaur lies still at last, her massive body quiet beneath the moon. Only the small creatures stir, the insects, the birds, the gentle scurrying of tiny lives in the undergrowth. The island is peaceful once more. It is easy to imagine that time has folded back upon itself, that the clocks have turned to an age before humankind. The world belongs to the giants again. Their roars and cries rise into the night air, drifting upward until they sound like echoes from a dream. For millions of years, these creatures had vanished, their bones buried beneath stone, their names whispered only in museums and books. But now they live again, walking softly beneath the stars. The lesson of their return is gentle but powerful. Life does not vanish so easily. It changes, it adapts, it continues in ways we do not always see. Birds in the skies carry the memory of their ancient cousins. Leaves rustling in the wind sound like the footsteps of herds long gone. The earth itself remembers, and in rare moments, those memories shine like sparks. Jurassic Park was one of those sparks, a fleeting vision of the past made present. The children who left the island will carry those visions forever. They will remember the sway of a long neck brushing the treetops. They will remember the pounding of a herd moving as one. They will remember the golden eyes of hunters in the shadows, the rumble of thunder mixing with the roar of the king. And perhaps, when they dream, they will walk among those creatures again in the safety of their imagination. For us too, the story lingers. It tells us to wonder at the world, to be amazed by what has come before us, and to tread carefully when we reach too far. It reminds us that life is strong, beautiful, and sometimes wild beyond measure. It reminds us that the world is full of mysteries, waiting quietly in the corners of time. And so, as the island sleeps, so too may we. Close your eyes and listen for the distant calls of ancient voices carried on the wind. Picture the brachiosaur stepping slowly through the trees, the triceratops resting in the grass, the gallimimus racing joyfully across the plains. Picture the great tyrannosaur standing proud beneath the moonlight, not as a monster, but as a reminder of the deep history of life. In dreams, the gates of the park open once more, not with fear, but with wonder. In dreams, the past and present walk side by side, and the roar of the dinosaurs is only a lullaby calling you deeper into rest. Sleep now, and let the ancient world carry you gently into silence. Long before Jurassic Park was ever imagined, people had been curious about dinosaurs. For thousands of years, Travelers sometimes found strange bones buried deep in the ground. Huge teeth, bigger than a person's hand. Claws like curved knives. Skulls so enormous they seemed like the remains of giants. In ancient times, people thought these bones belonged to dragons or monsters. They did not know that they were the remains of animals that had lived millions of years ago. It was only a few hundred years ago that scientists began to study these bones carefully. They compared them to the skeletons of living animals. They asked questions. Could these be the bones of creatures that no longer lived on Earth? Could they be from an age before humans existed? Slowly, the idea of dinosaurs began to take shape. The word dinosaur means terrible lizard. But dinosaurs were not really lizards at all. They were their own kind of animal, a group that lived for millions and millions of years. Some were enormous, taller than houses. Some were small, no bigger than a chicken. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4. Some had teeth sharp like knives, while others had flat teeth made for plants. When people first put dinosaur skeletons together in museums, they often made mistakes. At first, they thought some stood like giant lizards crawling low to the ground. Later, they learned dinosaurs held their bodies upright, strong and balanced. With every new discovery, the picture grew clearer. And even today, scientists are still learning new things. John Hammond, the man who dreamed of Jurassic Park, had been inspired by these discoveries. He wanted people not only to see skeletons in museums, but to see the creatures alive and moving. His scientists found a way by using tiny bits of blood trapped in amber. Amber is golden tree sap that hardened over millions of years, and inside it sometimes insects were caught and preserved. If a mosquito had once bitten a dinosaur and was trapped in amber, it might still carry traces of that dinosaur's blood. From that tiny droplet, the park's scientists tried to rebuild the entire creature. Of course, it was not as simple as it sounded. DNA, the code of life, is like a long storybook written inside every living cell. But over millions of years, the letters in that book break apart. The story becomes hard to read. The scientists filled in the missing pieces with bits from frogs and other animals. The result was not always perfect, but it was close enough to bring back a living creature. Imagine what it must have been like the first time a baby dinosaur hatched in their laboratory. Its tiny claws reaching out, its squeaks echoing against the walls. For the scientists, it must have felt like a miracle. A creature from another age, breathing again after being gone for so long. Hammond believed this was proof that his dream could work. And so Jurassic Park began, not just with bones in the earth, but with curiosity, questions, and discoveries that stretched across centuries. From the first person to find a tooth too large for any living creature, to the scientists who pieced together DNA, every step was part of the story. When you think of dinosaurs, you are not just thinking of ancient animals. You are also thinking of all the people who searched, studied, and wondered. Dinosaurs live in our imagination as much as they lived in their forests and plains. That is part of their magic. And so, in the quiet of the night, you can close your eyes and picture those first discoveries. A farmer in a field, finding a bone bigger than his plow. A scientist in a dusty room, turning over a fossil in wonder. And then long years later, a baby dinosaur hatching in a laboratory, opening its eyes for the very first time. Amber looks like golden glass, warm and glowing when the sun shines through it. But amber is not stone. It is hardened tree sap, frozen in time. Millions of years ago, when sticky resin dripped from trees, small insects, and even bits of plants sometimes became trapped inside. Over ages, that resin hardened into amber, preserving whatever it caught as perfectly as if it had been sealed in a jewel. In Jurassic Park, amber was the key. Some mosquitoes, long ago, had bitten dinosaurs. When they became trapped in sap, the blood they carried was sealed within. That blood held DNA, the secret code of life. From that, the scientists attempted to rebuild entire animals. Amber is often called nature's time capsule because it holds tiny snapshots of the past. A spider caught mid-step, a leaf with its veins still visible, even a bubble of air from millions of years ago, trapped as if waiting to be released. Holding a piece of amber is like holding a fragment of another world. John Hammond loved to show visitors a piece of amber with a mosquito inside. He carried it like a treasure, reminding everyone that from this small, shining stone came the dream of the park. It showed how something tiny could lead to something enormous. But amber also teaches patience. It takes millions of years to form. What it preserves lasts longer than human memory. It whispers that the past is never completely gone. Sometimes it hides, waiting quietly, ready to be discovered. As you drift toward sleep, picture yourself holding a piece of amber. Inside, a tiny insect rests as if caught yesterday. The golden light warms your hand, and you realize you are holding time itself. A doorway to a world long vanished, glowing gently in the dark. Part 14. The Dinosaurs of the Sea and Sky. Jurassic Park was filled with land dinosaurs, but the past held creatures of the sea and the air too. They were not truly dinosaurs, but they lived in the same ancient worlds. In the ocean swam the plesiosaurs, with long necks and paddle-like flippers. They glided gracefully through the water, chasing fish and squid. There were also ichthyosaurs, shaped like dolphins, fast and sleek. And the mosasaurs, enormous predators with jaws filled with sharp teeth, ruling the waves like giant sea lizards. Above the land soared the pterosaurs, the flying reptiles. Some were small as birds, flapping between trees. Others, like Quetzalcoatlus, were so large their wings stretched wider than a small airplane. They soared on warm air currents, gliding silently over rivers and plains. In later parks beyond Hammond's first dream, scientists would bring back some of these creatures as well. A mosasaur was kept in a huge lagoon, leaping out of the water to snatch its prey. Pteranodons were kept in aviaries with high nets, though sometimes they escaped, filling the skies with their cries. The sea and sky creatures remind us that the age of dinosaurs was not just on the ground. It was everywhere, in the depths of the oceans and the heights of the skies. The earth then was alive in every corner. Imagine lying back and looking up, seeing shadows of wings pass over the moon. Imagine diving into clear water and glimpsing shapes moving far below. The past was full of wonder in every direction. Part 15. The Secret of Life. At the heart of Jurassic Park was one simple idea: life finds a way. Dr. Ian Malcolm, one of the visitors, said these words as a warning. No matter how tightly humans tried to control nature, it always found paths of its own. The park's scientists tried to make the dinosaurs safe by designing only females so they could not breed. But frogs, whose DNA had been used to patch gaps, sometimes changed sex in the wild. And so the dinosaurs did too. Eggs were discovered in the jungle, proof that nature could not be stopped so easily. This secret that life adapts is what makes it so powerful. From tiny seeds growing between stones to birds soaring from once giant ancestors, life is always changing. The dinosaurs, thought gone forever, still live in every robin and sparrow outside our windows. Jurassic Park's lesson was not only about dinosaurs, but about the persistence of life itself. You cannot build fences around it forever. It will climb, crawl, or soar over them. It will reshape itself and continue. As you drift into dreams, remember that the world is alive all around you. The same spirit that moved in the dinosaurs still moves in the leaves, the rivers, and the creatures of today. Life's story is never finished. It is always finding a way forward. Among all the dinosaurs of Jurassic Park, the ones that most visitors loved to see first were the brachiosaurs. These were the towering, gentle giants with long necks that reached high into the trees. Their legs were like columns, strong enough to carry their massive weight, and their footsteps made the ground hum like a slow drumbeat. Brachiosaurs were plant eaters. They did not need sharp teeth or claws. Instead, they had long, peg-like teeth that helped them strip leaves from branches. They could stand still for hours, chewing slowly while the world moved quietly around them. They lived in herds, which made them feel safe, and when they moved together, it was like watching an entire forest on the move. In Jurassic Park, the brachiosaurs were among the first dinosaurs seen by the visitors. They lifted their necks toward the sky, reaching higher than any giraffe could, and they moved so peacefully that the humans could only stand in awe. Some visitors said it felt like seeing a dream come to life. At night, the brachiosaurs made soft, deep sounds like distant horns. They echoed through the valleys, calming the other dinosaurs. Even predators like the tyrannosaur left them alone, for they were too big and too strong to bother. When you think of the gentle giants, imagine standing beneath their shadow, feeling very small but also very safe. Imagine their warm breath drifting down like a soft breeze. They remind us that strength does not always come from sharp teeth or speed. Sometimes it comes from patience, peace, and size alone. Part 17. The Hunters of the Shadows. While the brachiosaurs were slow and calm, other dinosaurs were fast and clever. Among them were the velociraptors, the hunters of the shadows. They were not the largest dinosaurs in the park, but they were among the most feared. Velociraptors worked together, moving in packs. They could surround prey, outsmarting it with teamwork. They were quick, darting in and out of the trees like living shadows. Their sharp claws, especially the curved one on each foot, were dangerous tools. But their greatest weapon was their intelligence. In Jurassic Park, the raptors tested the fences that kept them inside. They remembered patterns. They learned. Even the scientists who created them were surprised by how clever they became. Dr. Alan Grant once said that if they had lived into modern times, raptors might have been as smart as dolphins or even apes. Though they were fierce, raptors were also fascinating. They showed that dinosaurs were not just slow or simple. Some were quick thinkers, survivors that adapted in many ways. In fact, many scientists now believe that raptors were closely related to birds. They may have had feathers, bright eyes, and sharp, bird-like movements. At night, the raptors' calls echoed through the jungle, sharp and piercing. They were reminders that the park was never fully under control. The hunters of the shadows were always watching, waiting. But even raptors had families and young to protect. In their own way, they too were part of the balance of nature. Fierce, yes, but also beautiful, a reminder that every world has its hunters as well as its gentle giants. Part 18, The Tyrant King. No dinosaur captured more attention than the Tyrannosaurus rex, whose name means Tyrant Lizard King. In Jurassic Park, the T-Rex lived in a massive paddock with tall fences, but even those fences sometimes trembled under its power. The T-Rex was one of the largest meat-eaters ever to walk the land. Its head was the size of a car, filled with teeth sharp enough to crush bone. Its roar could shake windows and send flocks of birds into the sky. And yet, it was also an animal simply trying to live. It hunted, it searched for food, and it cared for its own space. One of the most famous moments in the park's history came when the T-Rex broke free during a storm. The ground shook with its footsteps, and its roar split the night sky. But later, the same T-Rex would save the humans by fighting the raptors, showing that even a predator can become a protector in the right moment. The king of the dinosaurs was not always hunting. Sometimes it rested in the shade, breathing deeply, its eyes half closed. Sometimes it stood proudly under the rain, water running down its scales. In these quiet moments, it was less a monster and more a reminder of an ancient age of strength. When you think of the Tyrant King, imagine the earth trembling under each step. Imagine its shadow passing over you, massive and unstoppable. It reminds us of power, yes, but also of nature's majesty. Part 19, The Lost World. Jurassic Park was not the only place where dinosaurs lived again. Far away on another island called Isla Sorna, there was a secret laboratory and breeding ground. Here, the scientists raised many dinosaurs before moving them to the park. But when the lab was abandoned, the dinosaurs were left to live freely. This second island became known as the Lost World. Here, herds of dinosaurs roamed without fences or human control. They lived as they had millions of years ago, wild and untamed. There were dangers, of course, but also beauty. The Lost World showed what dinosaurs might have been like if they had survived into our time on their own. Explorers who visited Isla Sorna spoke of watching stegosaur families protect their young, or herds of Parasaurolophus moving like rivers across the land. They also told of raptors hunting in packs and the tyrannosaur protecting its nest. It was both paradise and peril, a true glimpse into a prehistoric age. The Lost World was proof that dinosaurs did not belong in cages. They belonged to nature. And though they were created by humans, once released, they became their own again. When you close your eyes, imagine standing on the shore of the Lost World, hearing distant calls through the mist. Somewhere out there, the ancient world is alive again. Part 20, The Dream of Tomorrow. The story of Jurassic Park is not only about the past, it is also about the future. It asks what humans should do with the knowledge they hold. Just because something is possible, does that mean it should be done? John Hammond dreamed of a park where families could marvel at living dinosaurs. Others dreamed of using dinosaurs as weapons or tools. But time and again, the dinosaurs reminded everyone that they were not playthings. They were living beings, part of nature, not to be controlled so easily. In the end, the true lesson is respect. Respect for life, for nature, for the mysteries that are bigger than us. Jurassic Park is a warning, but also a gift. It shows us how amazing the world once was, and how careful we must be with the world that is still here. And maybe, in the dreams of tomorrow, children will not need a park filled with recreations. They will find wonder in the living creatures already around them. in birds tracing the skies, in lizards basking in the sun, in the fossils that whisper stories from the earth. The dream continues, not in cages or fences, but in imagination. Every time we look at the stars or listen to the rustling of leaves, we can remember the giants that once lived here. They are not truly gone. They live in our stories, our discoveries, and our dreams. And so, as the night grows still, close your eyes and step softly into that dream. The gates of Jurassic Park open not with fear, but with wonder. Inside waits a world long gone, alive again in the quiet of your mind. A place where the past and future walk together beneath the moon. Jurassic Park was not built in a city or on the mainland. It was built on an island, far out in the ocean. The island was called Isla Nublar, which means Cloud Island. From the sky, it looked like a green jewel surrounded by blue water, with mountains rising in the center and forests stretching to the shore. Isla Nublar was chosen because it was far away, so the dinosaurs could be hidden and kept safe from the outside world. Boats brought workers, supplies, and visitors, but otherwise the island was quiet. There were beaches with white sand, cliffs with waves crashing against them, and hidden valleys where herds of dinosaurs could graze. The island itself was full of life even before the dinosaurs returned. Birds nested in the cliffs. Insects buzzed in the trees. Monkeys swung through the jungle branches. When the dinosaurs came, they added to this living world, filling the forests with new calls and footsteps. But the island was also wild. Storms came often, sweeping across the ocean with heavy rain and strong winds. The scientists built fences and walls, but nature could not be tamed so easily. The power went out, lightning struck, and the dinosaurs sometimes wandered where they were not meant to go. Isla Nublar became more than just a place. It was part of the story itself. Without the island's storms and jungles and cliffs, the story of Jurassic Park would not be the same. It was as if the land itself wanted to remind everyone that it was alive too, not just the creatures brought back to it. When you close your eyes, imagine standing on a high hill on Isla Nublar. You can see the ocean stretching forever, hear the roar of a distant dinosaur, and feel the warm wind carrying the smell of salt and leaves. The island is a world of its own, where the past and present meet. Part 22, The Egg Nursery. Every dinosaur in Jurassic Park began as a tiny egg. Deep inside the laboratories was a nursery, a safe and carefully protected place where eggs were kept warm until they were ready to hatch. The eggs looked like large, speckled stones. Some were the size of a football, while others, like the ones for giant sauropods, were even bigger. Each egg held a secret, a life waiting to begin. The scientists watched over them closely, checking the temperature, turning them gently, and making sure nothing went wrong. When the time came, cracks appeared on the shells. Slowly, tiny claws or snouts pushed through. A squeak or chirp might be heard, and then a baby dinosaur would wriggle its way out into the world. Wet and small at first, the babies grew quickly, their eyes bright and curious. Visitors to the park sometimes saw the moment of hatching. John Hammond, the park's founder, loved to show people the miracle of new life. He would hold a baby raptor or a baby triceratops, smiling proudly. It was as if he believed that seeing a newborn dinosaur would make people forget their fears and only feel wonder. The nursery was filled with soft lights, gentle sounds, and the smell of straw and warm air. It was one of the calmest places in the entire park. And yet, hidden within it was the beginning of everything. The dinosaurs that would one day roam the paddocks, graze in the fields, or shake the earth with their steps. Imagine walking through the nursery and seeing rows of eggs glowing softly under warm lamps. Imagine hearing the first peep of a baby breaking free. In that moment, you are watching history itself come alive again, tiny and fragile, yet full of possibility. Part 23. The Park That Never Opened. Jurassic Park was built with great care. There were visitor centers with grand halls, restaurants, and theaters. There were jeeps and tour tracks that would carry guests safely past the enclosures. Signs pointed the way, and even the fences had viewing spots so people could see the dinosaurs up close. Hammond dreamed of crowds of families coming to enjoy it. He imagined children pressing their faces to the glass, wide-eyed at the sight of a living triceratops. He imagined scientists sharing knowledge, and people from every country standing together, amazed at what had been created. But the park never truly opened. The first visitors were only a small group of experts invited to test it. And on that very visit, things went wrong. The fences failed, storms swept through, and the dinosaurs proved that they could not be contained. so the Grand Visitor Center stood mostly empty. The gift shops never sold their toys. The theater never played its movie to a full crowd. The restaurants never served dinners while brachiosaurs grazed outside the windows. It is strange to think of such a park, a place of wonder, fully built, waiting for guests who would never come. Today, in our imagination, we can walk those halls in silence. Dust settles on the displays. The lights flicker. Outside, the dinosaurs roam free, ignoring the fences and gates. The park that never opened reminds us that some dreams are too big to control. But it also reminds us that the dream itself, of seeing dinosaurs alive again, still lingers in the imagination. Part 24. The Sound of the Past. One of the most mysterious things about dinosaurs is the sounds they made. No one alive today has ever heard a real dinosaur call. Scientists can study skulls, throats, and bones to guess, but the true voices of the dinosaurs are hidden in time. In Jurassic Park, the creators tried to imagine what they might have sounded like. The brachiosaurs made deep, trumpeting calls that echoed like horns across the valley. The raptors clicked and chirped, communicating like clever birds. The tyrannosaur roared so loudly that it shook glass and rattled the air. Some sounds were gentle, like the low hum of a Parasaurolophus, whose long crest acted like a trumpet. Others were sharp and frightening, like the screech of a pterosaur circling above. Even the soft peeping of baby dinosaurs in the nursery was part of the chorus of this ancient world reborn. Imagine standing in the park at dusk, with the sun setting behind the mountains. One by one, the calls rise. First a low rumble in the distance, then a chorus of chirps, then a deep bellow rolling like thunder. The forest comes alive with voices not heard for millions of years. The sound of the past is not just noise. It is a song of survival, of warning, of calling to friends or family. It is a song that belongs to the earth itself. Part 25. The Dream Lives On. Jurassic Park did not last. The dinosaurs broke free, the fences fell, and people realized the danger of trying to control nature. But the dream of seeing dinosaurs did not disappear. It still lives in the hearts of people everywhere. Children still read about dinosaurs in books, and imagine what it would be like to stand beside one. Scientists still study fossils, searching for clues about how they lived, moved, and sounded. Artists still paint them, filmmakers still bring them to screens, and parks and museums still display their bones with pride. In a way, Jurassic Park succeeded, not with fences and cages, but with imagination. It reminded people that dinosaurs are not just dusty skeletons. They were real, living creatures that once ruled the earth. They were as alive as lions, elephants, or birds today. And so, when you close your eyes, the dream continues. You can still walk through the gates. You can still hear the roar of the tyrannosaur, the calls of the brachiosaurs, and the rustle of raptors in the brush. Jurassic Park is alive in your thoughts, a place you can visit anytime you wish. Not all of Jurassic Park's creatures lived on the ground. Some soared above it. These were the pterosaurs, flying reptiles that ruled the skies long before birds spread across the earth. While they were not truly dinosaurs, they lived at the same time, and so they became part of the park's wonder. The pteranodons were the most famous of the flyers. With wings that stretched wider than a car, they glided above the island, their shadows moving silently across the forests and rivers below. From the cliffs they dove, catching fish in their long beaks before rising again on the warm air. Visitors who saw them said it was like stepping back into another age. The sky itself felt alive, filled with wings that beat slowly, gracefully, across the clouds. Some people thought of them as dragons, though they were real and not from fairy tales. The aviary, a giant dome of glass and steel, was built to keep the flying reptiles safe and contained. Inside, waterfalls poured into rivers, and trees stretched toward the roof. But the pterosaurs sometimes escaped, reminding everyone that the sky cannot easily be fenced in. At night, the pterosaurs rested on high ledges, folding their wings around themselves. Their calls echoed like distant gulls, a haunting song that carried far across the waves. Imagine lying in bed and hearing those calls outside your window. Not scary, but ancient and full of mystery. The watchers in the sky remind us that even above the earth, life once thrived in ways we can only dream of. Part 27. The Healing Dinosaurs. Not all the stories of Jurassic Park are about danger. Some are about care. In the park's veterinary center, workers and scientists tended to dinosaurs who were sick or hurt. These places were quiet, filled with straw beds, soft lights, and the sounds of gentle breathing. One of the most famous moments came when Dr. Ellie Sattler found a sick triceratops. The great animal lay on its side, groaning softly. Its eyes blinked slowly, and its sides rose and fell with heavy breaths. At first, it seemed frightening to be so close to such a huge creature. But when Ellie placed her hand on its rough skin, she realized it was peaceful, even friendly. The triceratops was suffering from eating poisonous plants. The scientists worked to help it, cleaning its system and caring for it until it grew stronger. Visitors were amazed to see that even the most powerful dinosaurs needed care, just like any living thing. The veterinary staff kept records of medicines, food, and treatments. They studied each species, learning how to help them if they became ill. In a way, they became the doctors of an ancient age, bridging the past and the present. Imagine standing quietly beside a sleeping dinosaur in the medical bay, its sides moving with deep, slow breaths. The room is warm, the lights dim. You hear the gentle hum of machines and the soft whisper of people caring for it. It feels safe, calm, and filled with kindness. The healing dinosaurs remind us that every creature, no matter how big or strong, sometimes needs help. Part 28, The Forgotten Cages. When Jurassic Park was first built, many enclosures were planned but never finished. Some cages were half complete, with tall fences standing around empty fields. Others had signs ready for animals that never arrived. These forgotten cages tell a story of what might have been. There were plans for an enclosure of dilophosaurs, small predators with frills around their necks. There were sketches of giant ankylosaurs, armored like living tanks, that were never placed in their paddocks. Even ideas for huge aquatic creatures, swimming in vast lagoons, were considered but never finished. Walking through these empty spaces, one could imagine what they would have been like. A tour car would rumble past, and instead of silence, the forest would echo with calls. Visitors would point excitedly as herds grazed, or as strange, never-before-seen creatures stirred the water. But the cages stayed empty. Vines grew over the fences. Rain pooled in the ditches. Birds made nests in the towers meant for watchmen. In time, the forgotten cages became part of the jungle itself. Imagine wandering into one of these silent enclosures, hearing only the chirp of insects and the rustle of leaves. You see a sign with the name of a dinosaur that never came. It feels like a dream half-remembered, waiting to be finished. The forgotten cages remind us that not all dreams are completed, but sometimes the imagining is just as powerful as the real thing. Part 29, The Dinosaur Protectors. Not everyone in Jurassic Park wanted to use the dinosaurs for money or power. Some wanted to protect them. Among these were the paleontologists and animal keepers who believed the creatures deserved respect, not cages. Dr. Alan Grant, who had studied fossils all his life, was amazed when he saw real dinosaurs. But instead of seeing them as exhibits, he saw them as living beings, just like the ones he had once uncovered as bones. He cared for them, warned others not to underestimate them, and always treated them with awe. There were also keepers who worked daily with the animals, feeding them and learning their habits. Some kept detailed journals, writing about which plants the triceratops liked best, or how the gallimimus herds would run together like schools of fish. To them, the dinosaurs were not monsters. They were animals, powerful, yes, but also deserving of kindness. When things went wrong, these protectors often put themselves in danger to save the dinosaurs or to keep them safe from harm. They knew that the animals were not villains. They were simply being themselves, following instincts written in their blood. Imagine standing beside one of these protectors as they watch a herd grazing in the sunset. There is no fear in their eyes, only wonder. They whisper that the world is bigger than we can ever know. The dinosaur protectors remind us that caring is just as important as creating. Part 30, The Endless Night. Sometimes, storms on the island would cut the power for hours. In those moments, the park grew dark. The fences lost their glow, the buildings went silent, and only the sounds of the jungle remained. This was called the Endless Night, when the island returned to a more ancient time. Without lights, the stars shone brightly above. The moon lit the valleys and rivers. Dinosaurs moved through the trees, their shapes seen only in shadow. Visitors who experienced this night spoke of hearing footsteps in the dark, the low calls of distant giants, and the soft rustling of smaller creatures nearby. Though it was frightening, it was also beautiful. For once, there were no fences, no machines, no human control. The island was alive as it had been millions of years ago. The endless night was not just darkness. It was a doorway into the past. Imagine standing under the stars while a brachiosaur lifts its head, silhouetted against the moon. Imagine the air filled with sounds not heard for ages. It is calm, mysterious, and eternal. The endless night reminds us that the world is old, vast, and full of wonders that will never be fully tamed. Not all of Jurassic Park's creatures lived on the ground. Some soared above it. These were the pterosaurs, flying reptiles that ruled the skies long before birds spread across the earth. While they were not truly dinosaurs, they lived at the same time, and so they became part of the park's wonder. The pteranodons were the most famous of the flyers. With wings that stretched wider than a car, they glided above the island, their shadows moving silently across the forests and rivers below. From the cliffs, they dove, catching fish in their long beaks before rising again on the warm air. Visitors who saw them said it was like stepping back into another age. The sky itself felt alive, filled with wings that beat slowly, gracefully across the clouds. Some people thought of them as dragons, though they were real and not from fairy tales. The aviary, a giant dome of glass and steel, was built to keep the flying reptiles safe and contained. Inside, waterfalls poured into rivers, and trees stretched toward the roof. But the pterosaurs sometimes escaped, reminding everyone that the sky cannot easily be fenced in. At night, the pterosaurs rested on high ledges, folding their wings around themselves. Their calls echoed like distant gulls, a haunting song that carried far across the waves. Imagine lying in bed and hearing those calls outside your window. Not scary, but ancient and full of mystery. The watchers in the sky remind us that even above the earth, life once thrived in ways we can only dream of. Part 27. The Healing Dinosaurs. Not all the stories of Jurassic Park are about danger. Some are about care. In the park's veterinary center, workers and scientists tended to dinosaurs who were sick or hurt. These places were quiet, filled with straw beds, soft lights, and the sounds of gentle breathing. One of the most famous moments came when Dr. Ellie Sattler found a sick triceratops. The great animal lay on its side, groaning softly. Its eyes blinked slowly, and its sides rose and fell with heavy breaths. At first, it seemed frightening to be so close to such a huge creature. But when Ellie placed her hand on its rough skin, she realized it was peaceful, even friendly. The triceratops was suffering from eating poisonous plants. The scientists worked to help it, cleaning its system and caring for it until it grew stronger. Visitors were amazed to see that even the most powerful dinosaurs needed care, just like any living thing. The veterinary staff kept records of medicines, food, and treatments. They studied each species, learning how to help them if they became ill. In a way, they became the doctors of an ancient age, bridging the past and the present. Imagine standing quietly beside a sleeping dinosaur in the medical bay, its sides moving with deep, slow breaths. The room is warm, the lights dim. You hear the gentle hum of machines and the soft whisper of people caring for it. It feels safe, calm, and filled with kindness. The healing dinosaurs remind us that every creature, no matter how big or strong, sometimes needs help. Part 28. The Forgotten Cages. When Jurassic Park was first built, many enclosures were planned but never finished. Some cages were half complete, with tall fences standing around empty fields. Others had signs ready for animals that never arrived. These forgotten cages tell a story of what might have been. There were plans for an enclosure of dilophosaurs, small predators with frills around their necks. There were sketches of giant ankylosaurs, armored like living tanks, that were never placed in their paddocks. Even ideas for huge aquatic creatures, swimming in vast lagoons, were considered but never finished. Walking through these empty spaces, one could imagine what they would have been like. A tour car would rumble past, and instead of silence, the forest would echo with calls. Visitors would point excitedly as herds grazed, or as strange, never-before-seen creatures stirred the water. But the cages stayed empty. Vines grew over the fences. Rain pooled in the ditches. Birds made nests in the towers meant for watchmen. In time, the forgotten cages became part of the jungle itself. Imagine wandering into one of these silent enclosures, hearing only the chirp of insects and the rustle of leaves. You see a sign with the name of a dinosaur that never came. It feels like a dream half-remembered, waiting to be finished. The forgotten cages remind us that not all dreams are completed, but sometimes the imagining is just as powerful as the real thing. Part 29. The Dinosaur Protectors. Not everyone in Jurassic Park wanted to use the dinosaurs for money or power. Some wanted to protect them. Among these were the paleontologists and animal keepers who believed the creatures deserved respect, not cages. Dr. Alan Grant, who had studied fossils all his life, was amazed when he saw real dinosaurs. But instead of seeing them as exhibits, he saw them as living beings, just like the ones he had once uncovered as bones. He cared for them, warned others not to underestimate them, and always treated them with awe. There were also keepers who worked daily with the animals, feeding them and learning their habits. Some kept detailed journals, writing about which plants the Triceratops liked best, or how the Gallimimus herds would run together like schools of fish. To them, the dinosaurs were not monsters. They were animals, powerful, yes, but also deserving of kindness. When things went wrong, these protectors often put themselves in danger to save the dinosaurs or to keep them safe from harm. They knew that the animals were not villains. They were simply being themselves, following instincts written in their blood. Imagine standing beside one of these protectors as they watch a herd grazing in the sunset. There is no fear in their eyes, only wonder. They whisper that the world is bigger than we can ever know. The dinosaur protectors remind us that caring is just as important as creating. Part 30, the endless night. Sometimes, storms on the island would cut the power for hours. In those moments, the park grew dark. The fences lost their glow, the buildings went silent, and only the sounds of the jungle remained. This was called the endless night, when the island returned to a more ancient time. Without lights, the stars shone brightly above. The moon lit the valleys and rivers. Dinosaurs moved through the trees, their shapes seen only in shadow. Visitors who experienced this night spoke of hearing footsteps in the dark, the low calls of distant giants, and the soft rustling of smaller creatures nearby. Though it was frightening, it was also beautiful. For once, there were no fences, no machines, no human control. The island was alive as it had been millions of years ago. The endless night was not just darkness. It was a doorway into the past. Imagine standing under the stars while a brachiosaur lifts its head, silhouetted against the moon. Imagine the air filled with sounds not heard for ages. It is calm, mysterious, and eternal. The endless night reminds us that the world is old, vast, and full of wonders that will never be fully tamed. Milky Way, now you have 30 Jurassic Park bedtime lore parts, each one soothing, lore-rich, and perfect for drifting off. Would you like me to continue making another 5 every time until you have a full library, maybe 50, maybe more, so you can mix and match different nights? Among the most mysterious dinosaurs of Jurassic Park were the velociraptors. They were not the biggest, but they were clever, quick, and full of secrets. Raptors lived in special pens with high fences. The keepers knew they were smart and tested the fences every day, searching for weak spots. They hunted in packs, moving like shadows through the jungle. Their voices were unlike any other. They made clicking sounds, hisses, and strange barks to speak with one another. Some workers swore they heard the raptors calling in patterns, as if they were talking. Imagine hearing those calls echoing through the dark trees. Not loud, not angry, but curious and clever. The scientists studied them carefully. They watched how one raptor could distract while another moved in silence. They saw how they circled prey, how they waited for the right moment to strike. It was both frightening and fascinating. At night, the raptors gathered close and called softly to each other. The keeper said it sounded almost like music, a secret song passed through time. The call of the raptors reminds us that intelligence can be as powerful as strength. Part 37, the Egg Nursery. Deep inside Jurassic Park was the hatchery, where eggs rested in warm chambers until the baby dinosaurs were ready to hatch. This place was gentle and quiet, with humming machines that kept the air warm and the eggs safe. The eggs were round, each one carefully marked with the name of the species inside. Some were small, the size of a melon. Others were huge, as heavy as a pumpkin. Scientists checked them daily, turning them slowly so the babies grew strong. When an egg was ready, a crack would appear on its shell. Soon, a tiny snout poked through, followed by little claws. The baby would push and struggle until at last it wobbled free, squeaking and blinking at the world for the first time. Visitors were sometimes allowed to see a hatching. They leaned close as the tiny creature stumbled into the scientists' hands. Some were feathered, some scaled, all fragile and new. Imagine watching a baby Triceratops take its first breath, or a baby raptor opening its bright eyes. The nursery was full of soft sounds, the chirps of babies, the rustle of straw, the gentle voices of the caretakers. It was a place of beginnings, where life itself returned from the past. Part 38, the storm that changed everything. Isla Nublar, the island of Jurassic Park, often faced storms. Winds swept the forests, rain fell in heavy sheets, and lightning split the sky. But one storm was greater than all the rest. It began with dark clouds rolling over the sea. The air grew heavy, and the animals grew restless. Birds fled inland. Dinosaurs bellowed, uneasy with the pressure in the sky. Then the storm struck. Palm trees bent until they snapped. Rivers overflowed. The fences sparked as rain battered the wires. Boats rocked dangerously on the waves, unable to leave the island. The park fell into chaos as the power failed. For the dinosaurs, the storm was both frightening and freeing. Some were trapped in their paddocks, but others found doors and gates left unguarded. The jungle echoed with calls as creatures roamed where they had never been allowed before. The storm that changed everything was not just weather. It was a reminder that nature is greater than human plans. Imagine lying in a safe shelter, listening to the thunder roll while the distant roars of dinosaurs mingle with the rain. It is wild, untamed, and unforgettable. Part 39, the lagoon that never slept. Near the edge of the island was a wide lagoon, where the water shone deep blue and the air smelled of salt. It was calm on the surface, but below lay creatures from a world even older than the dinosaurs. In some versions of the park, the lagoon was home to great aquatic reptiles like mosasaurs, with jaws longer than boats. They swam in silence, gliding through the water with ease. From time to time, one would rise, breaking the surface with a mighty splash. The caretakers built platforms and viewing stations above the lagoon. Visitors could look down and see shadows moving far below. Some thought it was peaceful, like watching whales. Others felt shivers, knowing the creatures were powerful hunters. At night, the lagoon shimmered under the moon. The waves lapped gently against the shore. Sometimes, a long shape moved in the water, stirring ripples that reached the land. The caretakers said the lagoon never truly slept, for the creatures beneath were always moving, always watching. Imagine drifting in a boat across its surface, hearing nothing but the water and the distant cry of seabirds. The lagoon reminds us that the ocean holds secrets as old as the earth itself. Part 40, the dream that never died. Even after the park fell, the dream of Jurassic Park lived on. People remembered the gates, the dinosaurs, the wonder of seeing creatures once thought gone forever. Some scientists wanted to rebuild, to try again with better plans and safer fences. Others argued that the dinosaurs should be left alone, allowed to live free on their island. Around the world, children drew pictures of brachiosaurs, wrote stories about raptors, and imagined visiting someday. The dream of Jurassic Park was more than just dinosaurs. It was about discovery, about imagination, about the idea that the past could walk again beside us. It inspired books, movies, and endless ideas. And so, even as the jungle grew over the old roads, and the fences rusted in the rain, the dream never truly ended. As long as people remember, as long as stories are told, the gates will always open in our minds. Imagine lying in bed, closing your eyes, and seeing the island appear in the mist. You hear the distant call of a dinosaur, gentle and deep. You walk through the gate, and once again, the past is alive. A river wound through the island, its waters smooth and shining beneath the trees. Sometimes visitors could ride boats along it, drifting quietly while the dinosaurs came to the banks to drink. The river journey was one of the calmest ways to see the park. The water was cool and clear. Schools of fish darted beneath the surface, and dragonflies skimmed above it. On the shores, stegosaurs splashed their tails, and Parasaurolophus blew ripples with their long crests. From time to time, a brachiosaur would bend its long neck down to sip, sending waves across the boat. The river carried travelers through many lands. Past waterfalls that roared like drums, through canyons where echoes of ancient calls bounced, and into quiet pools where the air smelled of flowers. At night, the river reflected the stars. Floating downstream under the moonlight felt like sailing through the sky. The river journey reminded all who took it that water connects everything: the dinosaurs, the forests, and the people who came to see them. Part 47, the pterosaur cliffs. High on the edge of the island rose sharp cliffs that touched the clouds. Here, nests of pterosaurs clung to the rocks, their cries echoing in the wind. The cliffs were busy places. Parents swooped out over the sea, their wings wide as sails, before returning with fish for their chicks. The young pterosaurs flapped clumsily, testing their wings, hopping from ledge to ledge before one day taking their first flight. From below, it was breathtaking to see. Dozens of pterosaurs circled in the air, catching sunlight on their wings. They glided without effort, sometimes diving suddenly before soaring upward again. The cliffs were dangerous for humans to climb, but from a safe distance they could be admired. Their cries sounded wild and free, like voices from another time. At sunset, when the sky turned gold, the pterosaurs looked like living kites, painting patterns in the air. The cliffs reminded visitors that the sky, too, once belonged to giants. Part 48. The Old Control Room. Deep in the heart of the park stood the control room. Here, glowing screens showed the fences, the cameras, and the paths of every dinosaur. The workers kept watch around the clock, making sure all was safe. The room buzzed with quiet sounds. Computers hummed. Radios crackled with voices. Maps glowed with tiny lights, each one marking a living dinosaur on the island. To step inside was to feel like the whole park lay in your hands. But the control room also told a different story. For all its buttons and switches, the park could not fully control nature. When storms came, or power failed, the screens went dark, and the dinosaurs roamed where they pleased. Even so, the control room was a place of wonder. It was the mind of the park, a reminder of human curiosity and hope. Visitors often said it felt like standing inside a storybook, where the past and future were written together on glowing screens. The old control room stood long after the park closed, its lights fading but its memory alive. Part 49. The Forgotten Road. There was a road in Jurassic Park that no one used anymore. It wound through the jungle, cracked with vines and roots. Once, jeeps had driven tourists along it, but now it belonged to the forest. Ferns grew through the broken pavement. Birds nested in old signposts. Along the road's edge, small dinosaurs scurried in and out of the underbrush, claiming it as their own. The road had become part of the island again. Walking along it felt like walking into the past. You could almost hear the engines of jeeps that no longer came, the laughter of visitors who had left long ago. But instead of emptiness, there was peace. The forgotten road was not lost. It had simply changed, just as life always does. At night, fireflies floated above the cracks, glowing like lanterns to guide the way. The forgotten road whispered that even when human plans fade, nature will always find a way forward. Part 50. The Island at Rest. And so we come to the final chapter. The island of Jurassic Park lies quiet now, its forests thick, its rivers wide, its skies open. The gates are rusted, the roads overgrown, the machines silent. But the dinosaurs remain. They graze in the meadows, hunt in the jungles, and soar above the cliffs. They live not as attractions, but as themselves. The island is their home, and it has become whole again. At night, the stars shine brighter than ever. The roars of the dinosaurs carry softly across the hills, not in anger, but in harmony. The past and present meet here, balanced, timeless. The dream of Jurassic Park is not gone. It lives in the memory of those who saw it, in the stories we tell, and in the wonder it gives to children who imagine walking among the giants. The island itself rests, yet in dreams, its gates are always open. Close your eyes now. Picture the sea lapping against its shores, the wind brushing through its trees, the brachiosaur reaching for the tallest leaf. The island at rest waits for no one, yet welcomes all who dream of it. The story is never truly finished. It simply rests, just as you do now. Part 51. The Gentle Brachiosaurus. The Brachiosaurus was one of the tallest dinosaurs of all. Its neck stretched like a tree trunk, rising high above the ground to reach leaves no other creature could touch. In Jurassic Park, they were the first dinosaurs many visitors saw, moving slowly and calmly like giants from a storybook. Their footsteps were heavy but soft, shaking the earth only a little. They did not rush, for they had no reason to. They were peaceful, feeding on treetops and stretching toward the sun. Their long necks swayed gently, almost like ships sailing through the forest. At night, they would fold their necks and rest among the trees. Some said their breathing was so deep and steady it sounded like the wind itself. To watch a Brachiosaurus was to feel safe, as if the world had slowed down just to let you admire it. Part 52. The Mighty Tyrannosaurus Rex. The Tyrannosaurus Rex was the most famous of all the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. Its roar shook the air, echoing across the island like thunder. With powerful legs, a massive head, and sharp teeth, it was the king of the land. But the Tyrannosaur was not always hunting. Sometimes it walked quietly, its golden eyes searching the forest. It guarded its territory, reminding every creature that it ruled. Visitors were both afraid and amazed, for there was nothing else like it. At night, when the jungle was still, the tyrannosaur sometimes lifted its head and roared at the stars. It was not just a monster, it was a reminder of the strength and mystery of the past. Part 53, the clever velociraptor. Velociraptors were smaller than the tyrannosaur, but no less powerful. They were quick, clever, and worked together in packs. In the park, they were known as hunters of shadows, moving silently through the grass before striking with speed. They had sharp claws and keen eyes. But what made them truly special was their intelligence. They learned quickly, tested fences, and even seemed to plan together. Visitors who saw them from a safe distance often whispered in awe, knowing they were watching creatures who thought as much as they hunted. In their own way, the velociraptors were like the mind of the dinosaur world, fast, sharp, and always searching. Part 54, the armored ankylosaurus. The ankylosaurus looked like a living tank. Its body was covered in heavy plates of bone, and at the end of its tail swung a mighty club. Few predators dared to challenge it, for one strike of that tail could break bones. Yet the ankylosaurus was peaceful. It moved slowly through the ferns, munching plants with steady jaws. It was a creature of patience, spending most of its time in silence, hidden in the undergrowth. In the park, the ankylosaurus reminded visitors that strength does not always mean attack. Sometimes strength is in defense, in standing firm, and in moving through life without fear. Part 55, the three-horned triceratops. Triceratops were among the most beloved dinosaurs of Jurassic Park. With their three sharp horns and great frills, they looked fierce, yet they were gentle with their families. In the meadows, herds of triceratops grazed together. The young played in the grass while the adults kept careful watch. When danger approached, the herd formed a circle, horns facing outward, protecting the little ones in the middle. Visitors often said the triceratops looked like knights of old, guarding their loved ones. They showed that bravery was not in fighting for glory, but in protecting those you care for. Part 56, the tall stegosaurus. The stegosaurus was a strange and beautiful creature. Its back was lined with tall, diamond-shaped plates, and its tail carried sharp spikes. In the sunlight, its plates shone like shields, giving it a proud and powerful look. Stegosaurs were peaceful plant eaters, feeding on low shrubs and bushes. They moved slowly in groups, their tails swaying behind them like heavy hammers. When threatened, they would swing those tails to protect themselves. In the park, visitors were amazed at how gentle such a mighty creature could be. The stegosaurus seemed like a guardian of the forests, steady and ancient, carrying the memory of ages long gone. Part 57, the musical Parasaurolophus. Parasaurolophus were dinosaurs with long, curved crests on their heads. These crests were not just for show, they were like musical instruments. By blowing air through them, the dinosaurs made deep, echoing calls that sounded like horns. On quiet evenings in the park, you could hear their songs rolling across the rivers and valleys. Sometimes the calls were gentle, like a lullaby. Other times, they were loud and booming, carrying messages to the herd. The Parasaurolophus were creatures of sound, filling the island with voices of the past. Visitors said it was like listening to the earth itself singing. Part 58, the long-necked Diplodocus. The Diplodocus was another giant, though slimmer than the Brachiosaurus. Its neck stretched long and graceful, and its tail was even longer, so long that some said it could be cracked like a whip. It fed on leaves, sweeping its head side to side among the treetops. Despite its size, the Diplodocus was calm and gentle, moving in great herds across the plains. When they walked together, it was like watching a river of giants flowing across the land. At night, the herds rested in groups, their long necks curled gracefully around each other like a living circle. The Diplodocus showed that even the largest creatures could be peaceful travelers. Part 59, the swift Gallimimus. The Gallimimus was one of the fastest dinosaurs in the park. It looked like a giant bird without wings, with long legs built for running. When frightened, the whole herd would race across the plains, moving like waves of wind. Visitors who saw them said it was like watching water flow, smooth, endless, and free. The Gallimimus did not fight, for speed was its gift. It could run from danger faster than most predators could chase. To see them was to understand freedom. They were joy in motion, creatures made for running beneath the open sky. Part 60, the winged pteranodon. Though not truly dinosaurs, the pteranodons were part of the park's wonder. With wings wide as cars, they soared through the sky, diving toward the sea to catch fish with sharp beaks. From the cliffs, they launched into the wind, gliding for miles without a single flap. To watch them was to see the ancient skies reborn. At dusk, flocks of pteranodons filled the horizon, their shapes outlined against the glowing sunset. They reminded visitors that the world of dinosaurs was not only on land, but also in the air above. Their cries echoed like calls from the past, telling stories of a time when the skies belonged to giants. The Spinosaurus was unlike any other dinosaur in Jurassic Park. It had a great sail on its back, tall and wide like the mast of a ship. It lived near rivers and lakes, where it hunted for fish with its long snout filled with sharp teeth. The Spinosaurus was larger than even the Tyrannosaurus. It moved through the water with ease, splashing with its powerful claws. Visitors rarely saw it, for it preferred the quiet banks where the jungle met the river. Though fierce, the Spinosaurus was a reminder that not all giants ruled the land. Some chose the waters, blending power with patience, moving between two worlds. Part 62. The quick Compsognathus. Compsognathus, often called compys, were small dinosaurs no bigger than a chicken. They were quick and curious, darting through the grass in groups. In the park, they often gathered near fallen logs or streams, chattering softly as they searched for insects and scraps. Though tiny, they had bright eyes and sharp claws, and together they could be bold. Visitors laughed when they saw the little dinosaurs hopping and running, for they were playful and busy. The compys showed that size was not the measure of wonder. Even the smallest dinosaurs carried the magic of the ancient world. Part 63. The spiky Kentrosaurus. The Kentrosaurus was a cousin of the Stegosaurus, but it carried more spikes than plates. Its back and tail were lined with sharp points, giving it the look of a living fortress. It moved slowly, browsing on low plants, its spikes glinting in the sun. Predators kept their distance, knowing one strike from its tail could be deadly. Despite its armor, the Kentrosaurus was calm. It lived in herds, its spikes serving as shields for the group. In Jurassic Park, people admired its strange and powerful design, as if nature had painted it with both beauty and strength. Part 64. The armored Edmontonia. The Edmontonia was another armored plant eater, covered in thick plates and spikes that protected its body. Unlike the Ankylosaurus, it had no tail club, but its armor alone made it nearly untouchable. It moved with slow steps through the forest, chewing ferns and bushes. When threatened, it would huddle low, its spikes outward, like a living shield. In the park, the Edmontonia taught visitors that defense could be just as impressive as attack. Its steady walk and quiet strength made it a creature of patience and calm. Part 65. The sailback Dimetrodon. Though older than the dinosaurs, the Dimetrodon was often included in Jurassic Park displays. It had a great sail on its back, rising from its spine like a fan. It lived near the water, crawling low on four legs, hunting fish and small animals. Its sail may have helped it gather warmth from the sun or show its strength to others. Visitors said the Dimetrodon looked like a dragon from a storybook. It was a bridge to an even older world, long before the dinosaurs, reminding everyone how far back life's story reaches. Part 66. The enormous Argentinosaurus. The Argentinosaurus was one of the largest creatures to ever walk the earth. Longer than a football field and taller than most buildings, it dwarfed nearly every other dinosaur. Its neck stretched high into the trees, and its body moved like a mountain come alive. Each step shook the ground, yet it was gentle, eating only leaves and branches. In Jurassic Park, few places were large enough to hold such a giant, but its presence filled visitors with awe. The Argentinosaurus showed how vast life could become, how nature could build something both massive and peaceful. Part 67. The crested Corythosaurus. The Corythosaurus was known for the tall crest on its head, shaped like a helmet. Like the Parasaurolophus, it used this crest to make sounds, deep calls that echoed across the fields. They lived in herds, moving together with their young. Their voices were like music, each crest making a slightly different tone, creating a chorus that rolled through the valleys. Visitors often stopped just to listen, saying it felt like standing in the middle of an ancient orchestra. The Corythosaurus filled the park with voices of harmony. Part 68. The horned Carnotaurus. The Carnotaurus was a strange and fearsome predator. It had two horns above its eyes, giving it the look of a bull. Its arms were tiny, even smaller than a tyrannosaur's, but its legs were powerful, built for speed. It hunted in bursts, racing through the jungle with its jaws snapping. Yet it was rare to see, for it preferred to stalk quietly before revealing itself. In the park, people marveled at its strange form, both fierce and unusual. The Carnotaurus was a reminder that nature creates in many shapes, some graceful, some fierce, all remarkable. Part 69, the plated Amargasaurus. The Amargasaurus was a smaller relative of the giant sauropods, but it carried tall spines along its neck and back. These spines may have held skin that formed sails, or they may have been for defense. It grazed calmly, its long neck sweeping across the low forests. In groups, the Amargasaurus looked like moving forests of spikes. Visitors were amazed at how such a gentle creature carried such dramatic armor. The Amargasaurus showed that even the quietest giants could look like warriors. Part 70, the ocean Mosasaurus. In the park's Great Lagoon lived the Mosasaurus, a giant of the seas. It was longer than a bus, with jaws that could swallow sharks whole. It swam with powerful flippers, gliding through the water with grace. Visitors could watch from glass tunnels below, seeing the Mosasaurus drift like a shadow in the deep. When it leapt from the water, its splash shook the stands, a reminder of the power hidden in the oceans. Though fierce, the Mosasaurus was also beautiful, a creature of the deep past. It showed that the story of life is not only on land or in the sky, but also in the endless blue below. Part 71, the Great Giganotosaurus. The Giganotosaurus was one of the largest meat-eaters to ever walk the earth, even bigger than the Tyrannosaurus. Its name means giant southern lizard, for it was discovered in South America. With long jaws full of sharp teeth, it hunted massive prey, even the huge sauropods. It walked on two legs, its tail balancing its enormous head. In Jurassic Park, it was admired not only for its size, but also for its quiet power. The Giganotosaurus showed that there was always something bigger in the world, something even the tyrant king would respect. Part 72, the plated Euoplocephalus. The Euoplocephalus was a heavily armored dinosaur, covered in bony plates from head to tail. At the end of its tail was a large club, like a hammer of stone. It was a cousin of the Ankylosaurus, and just as peaceful. It moved slowly, eating low plants, but when danger came, it would stand its ground, swinging its tail to protect itself. Visitors in the park loved its solid, sturdy look. The Euoplocephalus seemed like a living castle, strong and unshakable, yet gentle in its way of life. Part 73, the crested Dilophosaurus. The Dilophosaurus was known for the twin crests that rose from the top of its head. These crests were bright and colorful, perhaps used to impress or warn others. It was slender and quick, moving gracefully on two legs. In the park, it became famous for the way it surprised its prey, using both speed and cunning. Though it was smaller than some predators, the Dilophosaurus reminded visitors that beauty and danger can sometimes share the same shape. Its twin crests marked it as one of the most unique hunters of the ancient world. Part 74, the long-necked Mammonchosaurus. The Mammonchosaurus was a sauropod known for having one of the longest necks of all dinosaurs. Its neck stretched like a bridge, letting it reach leaves far beyond the reach of others. It moved in herds, each one a gentle giant wandering the forests. From a distance, their necks swayed like tall trees moving in the wind. Visitors to the park were amazed at its grace, for despite its size it moved softly, like a mountain drifting across the land. The Mammonchosaurus was a creature of height and patience, forever reaching toward the sky. Part 75, the helmeted Pachycephalosaurus. The Pachycephalosaurus was famous for its thick, dome-shaped skull. Its name means thick-headed lizard, and with good reason, for its head was built like stone. Some believe they used their heads to clash with one another, ramming like rams in a contest of strength. Others thought the dome was for display, showing age and pride. In Jurassic Park, they sometimes butted trees or rocks, echoing like drums through the forest. They showed visitors that even among dinosaurs, play and challenge were part of life. Part 76, the winged Quetzalcoatlus. The Quetzalcoatlus was one of the largest flying creatures ever to live. With wings as wide as a small airplane, it soared high above the land, casting giant shadows on the ground below. It hunted fish and small animals, swooping with a long beak. From the cliffs of the park, it would launch into the wind, gliding for miles with barely a flap. Visitors said watching it was like seeing a dragon from ancient stories. The The Quetzalcoatlus reminded everyone that the skies once belonged to giants. Part 77. The striped Majungasaurus. The Majungasaurus was a predator from Madagascar, known for its short snout and unique horns above its eyes. It was smaller than the great tyrannosaur, but just as fierce in its homeland. It was a patient hunter, often following prey for hours before striking. Its strong legs and sharp teeth made it a master of ambush. In the park, it was admired for its strange look, almost otherworldly. The Majungasaurus showed that nature shapes life in many surprising ways, each suited to its own world. Part 78. The duck-billed Edmontosaurus. The Edmontosaurus was a peaceful plant eater, part of the hadrosaur family. It had a wide, duck-like beak and lived in large herds across the plains. They moved together for safety, their footsteps thundering softly like distant rain. Their calls were gentle, deep sounds that rolled across the fields. Visitors loved seeing the herds of Edmontosaurus, for they seemed like great families of dinosaurs, always together, always caring for one another. Part 79. The horned Styracosaurus. The Styracosaurus was a cousin of the Triceratops, but instead of 3 horns, it had one long horn on its nose and a crown of spikes on its frill. It looked like a living shield decorated with spears. Despite its fierce appearance, it was gentle with its herd. The spikes were for protection, not aggression. When predators came too close, the Styracosaurus lowered its head, horns outward, standing strong. In the park, visitors admired its beauty and power. The Styracosaurus showed that even the fiercest armor could guard a peaceful heart. Part 80. The armored Sauropelta. The Sauropelta was a plant eater covered in heavy armor, with long spikes along its neck and shoulders. It was low to the ground, walking on 4 legs as it grazed on ferns. Its armor made it nearly impossible for predators to attack, and its spikes gave it a fearsome look. Yet it spent its days in quiet peace, moving slowly and eating the plants of the forest. In the park, the Sauropelta was a favorite of children, for it looked both strange and wonderful, like a creature from a dream. It showed that nature's designs can be both strong and beautiful.